The 28-year-old Nicholas Duffy Fudge died on Thursday. Duffy, who grew up in Greenland, New Hampshire, was the first mate on Captain Tyler McLaughlin's fishing vessel called the Pinwheel. The statement from the TV show went on today.
Wicked Tuna is known as one of the greatest fishing shows ever made. Built on rough seas, massive bluefin, and characters so real they felt like family. But behind the cameras, it would truly break your heart to know that some of the very people who kept you glued to your screen are no longer with us, and others were forced to walk away from the show they loved. What really happened to them? Join us as we reveal 10 shocking untold stories about Wicked Tuna that will leave you speechless, and make sure you stay for the last one, because it will change everything you thought you knew about the show. Nicholas Fudge. When you talk about the soul of the Pinwheel, you have to talk about Nicholas Fudge. Better known to every fan of the show as Duffy, he wasn't the loudest guy on the deck. Instead, he was just the one everybody looked to when things got hard out there. Born on August 1st, 1989, in Greenland, New Hampshire, Duffy grew up with fishing in his blood. He started tuna fishing as a young boy alongside his father and grandfather, learning the craft from the people who loved it most before he ever had a reason to. By the time Duffy became first mate on Captain Tyler McLaughlin's Pinwheel, he was already one of the most naturally gifted fishermen in his corner of New England. His obituary described him as someone who had become one of the top sport fishermen in the country, and the cameras confirmed it every single season. But here is something that you don't know about him. Duffy appeared on both Wicked Tuna and its spin-off series, Wicked Tuna. Outer Banks, earning fans in both. He wasn't loud about it. He didn't play to the camera or manufacture drama. He just fished, and he fished at a level that commanded respect from men twice his age. Off the boat, he was someone who lit up a room without trying. Friends remembered him as the kid who was always the coolest in the group, but somehow made everyone else feel just as cool. That combination of quiet excellence and genuine warmth made him unforgettable on screen and off it. Then on July 19, 2018, the news hit the community like a wave. Nicholas Fudge passed away unexpectedly at just 28 years old, days before what would have been his 29th birthday. The official cause of death was never publicly released, but within the fishing community, the accounts that circulated pointed toward decompression sickness, known as the bends, a condition caused by nitrogen bubbles forming in the blood when a diver resurfaces too quickly. For those who spend their lives in and around these waters, it is a known and brutal risk. The show's official channels confirmed only that his death was unexpected. But the story of what came next is even more shocking. Don't go anywhere, because the next loss on our list hit just 5 months later. And this time, the road claimed what the sea could not. William "Will-Billy" Hathaway. Wicked Tuna Outer Banks worth watching because of William Hathaway. Known everywhere from Ocean City, Maryland, to the Carolina coast by the nickname Will-Billy, he was the first mate on the Foolish Pleasures, an Ocean City vessel that brought its own brand of East Coast grit to the competition. He was not born into the storied ports of Gloucester or the deep water legacy of the Outer Banks, but he earned his standing on those waters through pure skill and the kind of magnetic personality that makes other fishermen want to go to sea with you. Those who fished alongside him called him one of the most gifted fishermen in Worcester County, and that reputation existed long before any camera crew ever followed him offshore. Hathaway and Captain Dale Lisi of the Foolish Pleasures auditioned for Wicked Tuna, Outer Banks together in 2016, and the show signed them immediately. It was not hard to see why. Will-Billy had a laid-back, sun-bleached energy that balanced perfectly against the cutthroat competition and the relentless financial pressure that defined every season on the water. While other crews wore their stress on their faces, Hathaway carried himself with the ease of a man who genuinely loved what he was doing. The Foolish Pleasures finished third place in their run, a result that reflected exactly how capable these men were. And beyond the scores, Will Billy was simply the guy everyone gravitated toward. Friends described him as someone with a supernatural ability to brighten the day of anyone he met. The Ocean City fishing community was not just a professional network to him. It was home. Then, on December 15, 2018, just 5 months after the Wicked Tuna family lost Duffy Fudge, William Hathaway was killed in a car accident in Salisbury, Maryland. He was 36 years old. He had been forced into a roadside ditch when another driver cut him off. His airbags never deployed. In the minutes that followed, he called his wife Mary to say he was okay, and those were the last words she heard from him. When emergency services arrived, they found him unresponsive, slumped over the center console. He was pronounced dead at Peninsula Regional Medical Center. He left behind Mary and their newborn daughter, Molly Jean, who was just 3 months old. The fishing community raised tens of thousands of dollars for the family within days. He was described simply as an exceptional human being whose passion was the sea. Will Billy Hathaway took his final ride not at sea, but on a quiet country road. And the waters off the Outer Banks have never quite felt the same. Captain Charlie Griffin. Charlie Griffin was one exceptional part of Wicked Tuna. Griff, as he was known to everyone who crossed his path, was not a television personality who happened to fish. He was a commercial fisherman, in the deepest sense of the word, a man shaped by decades of blue water and hard work before a single camera ever pointed his way. Born and raised in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, Griffin once said on the show that he started fishing when he was a pretty young boy and he had spent his life on the Outer Banks. That was not a rehearsed line. It was simply who Charlie Griffin was. He had been fishing these waters since he was 14 years old. As captain of the Reels of Fortune, Griff appeared on seasons 2 through 5 of Wicked Tuna, Outer Banks, competing with the kind of deep local knowledge that only a lifetime on those specific waters can produce. What made his story unlike any other captain on the show was who stood beside him on that deck. His son, Jake, was his first mate, and watching a father and son fish together, carry the pressure of a bluefin season together, and trust each other completely out there on the open Atlantic was something television rarely captures so honestly. The Reels of Fortune won Season 4. In the Outer Banks community, Charlie Griffin was a legend long before the cameras arrived. But everything changed suddenly. On March 4th, 2024, Captain Charlie Griffin died in a boating accident off the coast of Oregon Inlet, North Carolina. He was 65 years old. He and a second boater had departed Virginia Beach en route to a marina in Monte for repairs when their vessel capsized somewhere near Oregon Inlet. The U.S. Coast Guard searched for 41 hours, covered approximately 400 miles by air and sea, and found Griffin and his beloved dog, Layla, on shore near Pea Island. But death was not the only way this show lost its beloved faces. Stay with us, because what comes next is even more unexpected. Sandro Maniaci. One of the biggest mysteries in Wicked Tuna is what happened to one of the show's most recognizable crew members. Believe it or not, Sandro Maniaci was once the trusted first mate aboard FV-Tuna.com, the boat that would go on to dominate the competition season after season. That's right, before the rivalries got bigger and the series became a hit with millions of viewers, Sandro was standing beside Captain Dave Carraro during some of the most memorable catches in the show's history. So why did he disappear? Let's find out. Back in the early days of Wicked Tuna, Sandro Maniaci was an important part of the FV-Tuna.com crew. As Dave Carraro's first mate, he spent countless hours chasing giant bluefin tuna across the waters off Gloucester. Fans quickly noticed his calm personality, sharp instincts, and ability to stay focused under pressure. While other crew members often grabbed attention with big personalities, Sandro let his work do the talking. Everyone respected his skill and dedication. But as the show grew more popular, something unexpected began to happen. FV-Tuna.com was becoming one of the most successful boats in the fleet. The crew was landing massive fish and regularly competing for the top spot on the leaderboard. One of their most unforgettable moments came when they helped bring in a giant bluefin tuna weighing more than 1,000 pounds. Catches like that helped turn the crew into fan favorites. To many viewers, Sandro seemed like a permanent part of the team. But television can change quickly. As new seasons arrived, fans started noticing that Sandro was appearing less often. The familiar first mate who had been there through so many important moments was no longer getting the same amount of screen time. Unlike many reality television departures, there was no dramatic announcement, no emotional farewell, and no major storyline explaining exactly what happened. He simply wasn't there anymore. For longtime viewers, that raised plenty of questions. Had he moved on to other opportunities? Did he simply want a life away from television cameras? Whatever the reason, the show never made a big moment out of his absence. While Dave Carraro continued leading FV-Tuna.com, Sandro gradually faded from the story he helped build. Still, many fans remember him as one of the most important crew members from the early years of Wicked Tuna. His quiet confidence, experience, and teamwork helped create some of the show's most unforgettable moments. Bill Monte. Remember Bill Monte. Captain of the bounty hunter and a commercial fisherman for over 4 decades, Monte was the old-timer of the fleet, the man who had been doing this since the other captains were still in school. He did not come to fishing late, and he did not come to it for television. When the cameras started rolling in 2012, Bill Monte was already a Gloucester legend, a man so embedded in the tuna fishing community that first mates were lining up for the chance to crew under him. He fished alongside his wife Donna, one of the only women working as crew in the entire Gloucester fleet, which made the bounty hunter something different from every other boat on the show. It was not just a vessel, it was a family operation, built on 4 decades of shared sacrifice and shared love of the sea. Monte appeared on Wicked Tuna from Season 1 through Season 3, bringing with him the kind of seasoned authority that younger captains simply could not fake. He was the man the rest of the fleet measured themselves against, the standard of what a career commercial fisherman actually looked like. But even the toughest fishermen eventually feel the toll of the life they've chosen. After decades spent battling giant bluefin tuna on rough Atlantic waters, the physical demands of the job had become impossible to ignore. Years of long days, heavy gear, and relentless conditions had taken their toll. When the bounty hunter quietly disappeared from Wicked Tuna after Season 3, there was no controversy, no dramatic farewell, and no behind-the-scenes conflict. Monte simply chose to step away. It was a decision shaped by experience, age, and a lifetime earned on the water. He left exactly as he had lived, quietly, professionally, and with dignity. Now you want to stay for the next name on our list, because this is what changes everything. Paul Hebert. When you talk about the most complicated story in all of Wicked Tuna, you have to talk about Paul Hebert. On one side of the ledger, he is a 3rd-generation commercial fisherman who learned this craft before he could drive. a man who suffered an accident so severe that doctors told him he would never fish again. Both knees destroyed, his livelihood ripped away, his identity suddenly in question. He came back anyway. He pushed through pain on every trip, stood on rocking decks for hours at a time on legs that were never fully right again, because commercial fishing was the only life he had ever known. When Wicked Tuna came calling, Dave Carraro personally reached out. Hebert said yes, bought his own boat, the Wicked Pissa, became captain, and built a genuine following. Loud personality, relentless competitor, fan favorite. The kind of fisherman viewers rooted for even when he was losing. Then, in 2015, the federal government came knocking. Hebert was indicted on charges that he had collected over $44,000 in Social Security and Medicaid disability benefits between 2010 and 2013. Benefits he first applied for after his knee injury genuinely left him unable to work, but which he continued receiving after he joined a nationally televised fishing show. He pleaded guilty. 4 years probation. Over $53,000 in restitution. The government's position was blunt. It was outrageous that a man claiming disability was on camera hauling 800-pound fish for a national audience. The optics were impossible to defend, and Hebert did not try to defend them. What makes this story genuinely tragic is the full picture. A man who truly could not walk properly, who clawed his way back to the only life he understood, who made a desperate decision during a hard stretch and had it catch up with him in the most public way imaginable. He kept fishing. He even won Season 10. But the cloud never fully lifted, and every trophy came with a shadow attached. Captain Jessie Anderson. One person who never needed a spotlight to prove her worth was Captain Majestic Jessie Anderson. Born with a name as one-of-a-kind as the career she built around it, Jessie had been fishing since she was 5 years old, learning to set drift nets from a juniper-planked skiff in Currituck Sound alongside her grandfather. By the time she was running her own vessel out of Hatteras, North Carolina, a 53-foot custom Jarrett Bay she named the Carolina Girl, she had become one of the most respected offshore charter captains on the entire Outer Banks. When Wicked Tuna, Outer Banks came calling for Season 2, Jessie stepped into history as co-captain of the show's first-ever all-female crew aboard the Real Action. It was a genuinely groundbreaking moment in a franchise built almost entirely around men, and it put her in front of a national audience that had never seen anything like it on a tuna fishing dock. But television and commercial fishing rarely make comfortable neighbors, and Jessie Anderson was never in this for the fame. The season was tough. The Real Action finished second to last, catching just one fish the entire run. A brutal result for a woman whose real-world track record said something very different about her abilities. Behind the scenes, the experience came with pressures that had nothing to do with bluefin. The filming schedule was pulling her away from the Carolina Girl charter fishing business she had spent years building, and that was a trade she was not prepared to keep making. When Season 3 came around, Jessie did not show up for filming. Her response was brief. She made it clear that fishing was something she pursued for enjoyment and practical benefit rather than recognition, adding that she preferred the solitude and independence that came with fishing on her own. The Real Action did not return either. For a woman who started fishing at 5 years old and built an entire life around the water on her own terms, walking away from a television show that did not serve those terms was not a hard decision. It was just the right one. Brad Krosowski. Now, speaking of those who gave everything to this show and walked away with nothing left in the tank, you have to talk about Brad Krosowski. Captain of the Fish Hawk and one of the most quietly beloved figures in the entire Wicked Tuna fleet, Krosowski came to his captaincy the hard way, starting out as first mate on the Wicked Tuna under Paul Hebert, learning the craft from the inside and eventually converting a commercial boat into his own fishing vessel that the crew affectionately nicknamed the Tuna Bago. Born and raised in Manasquan, New Jersey, Brad grew up fishing with his father and brother, two commercial tuna fishermen themselves, which meant the water was never a hobby for this family. It was a way of life passed down like a trade. He joined Wicked Tuna in Season 6 and immediately showed he belonged. A hard-working, determined captain, with a dry sense of humor and the kind of blue-collar grit that fans recognized and respected. Season 7 was arguably his finest hour. The Fish Hawk finished runner-up in the entire competition, a result that announced to the whole fleet that Krosowski was not a background character. He was a genuine contender. But the grind of commercial tuna fishing on a television schedule is not something a body absorbs without consequences. The stress, the physical demands, the relentless pressure of performing at that level season after season, all while the cameras rolled and the country watched. It accumulated. After Season 10, Brad Krosowski stepped away from the show. He cited his health and his family as the reasons, and he did not elaborate further. He did not need to. For a man who grew up understanding that fishing was work first and everything else second, the decision to put his well-being ahead of his television career was the most honest thing he could have done. He left on his own terms, quietly and without drama, exactly the way he had always carried himself on that boat. But the story doesn't end with him. Keep watching, because the next name on the list is the one that will truly break your heart. Paul J. Yellow. Paul J. Yellow was not one of the famous faces viewers saw every week on Wicked Tuna, but he played an important role behind the scenes. He was a longtime commercial fisherman and a crew member on a 74-foot fishing vessel connected to the show in Gloucester, Massachusetts. At 60 years old, he had spent many years working on the water and was respected in the fishing community. In 2019, tragedy struck while the vessel was about 30 miles off the coast of Cape Cod. Around 9:30 in the morning, an explosion happened on board. Paul Yellow was killed instantly, and another crew member, Michael Roberts, was seriously injured. The boat was owned and operated by Captain Dave Carraro and his son Nick Carraro, both well-known figures from Wicked Tuna. The U.S. Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board investigated the accident, but the exact cause of the explosion was never determined. Yellow's death was a heartbreaking loss for his family, friends, and the Gloucester fishing community. His story reminds us of the real dangers fishermen face every day. The show itself. And finally, one last loss worth mourning is the show itself. After 13 seasons and more than 200 episodes, Wicked Tuna came to an end in May 2024. National Geographic did not make a grand announcement. There was no farewell special, no final dockside send-off, no moment where the fleet gathered one last time. It simply stopped airing, the way so many things in the fishing world end, without ceremony, without warning, and without enough time to say goodbye. For the fans who had followed these boats since 2012, through loss, triumph, legal battles, and tragedy, the silence hit harder than any finale could have. The waters off Gloucester are still out there. The bluefin are still running. But the cameras that once made those waters feel like the center of the world have moved on. And just like that, the pinwheel stopped turning. What do you think about these tragic and surprising stories from behind the scenes of Wicked Tuna? Did any of them catch you off guard? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more untold stories about your favorite shows. Click on the next video showing on your screen. You won't want to miss it.